Welcome to TWU Local 577's Member Education Podcast. I'm Klarissa Principe, your recording secretary, and I am here with TWU Counsel, Mark Richards.
Thank you.
And we are here to break down something that directly affects every one of us. The announced acquisition of Sun Country Airlines by Allegiant Airlines. On January 11th, 2026, Allegiant and Sun Country announced a $1.5 billion deal that, if closes as expected, will retire Sun Country and it fold everything under the Allegiant name. That means multiple workforces, multiple contracts, and multiple unions that will need to figure out exactly what comes next. And this isn't just about flight attendants. Dispatchers and other work groups across both carriers will feel the effects too. Our members deserve straight answers, so we went to an expert in the field. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm a union lawyer for over 45 years. I started out as a union organizer with the United Farm Workers when I was young, thin, and had hair. And I went from being a union organizer to a college professor, where I started a union at one of the largest community colleges in the country. And that's all I've done my whole life. And I was very proud in the mid-'80s. I became counsel to the Eastern flight attendants. Many people may not remember, it was a big airline on the East Coast, but it was worldwide. And it went through a bankruptcy and went out of business eventually. But I was Eastern Flight Attendants General Counsel at TWU Local 553. Very, very proud of those days. And I have been through many airline mergers and acquisitions, and they're very complicated, but the TWU does it right. The TWU really understands this complicated process. And so we represent, our law firm represents many hundreds of unions. We're the general counsel to the air division of the TWU. Thank you out there for that confidence. And we have worked on bankruptcies, mergers, acquisitions, American Airlines, US Air. We are in the middle right now of the Hawaiian airline purchase and acquisition by Alaska Air. So we know this area well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that background info. Before we get started into the legal and the labor specifics, let me give our members a quick look at where this deal stands today. Here's the timeline. So on January 11th, that's when the merger was announced. January 14th, TWU and Teamsters issued monitoring statements. March 16th, the DOJ antitrust clearance was given. April 15th, the DOT interim exemption was approved. April 20th, the post-merger Allegiant board structure was announced. Next, we are expecting the shareholder vote and deal close, possibly around May 13th. After that post-close, there will be a single FAA operating certificate process, and then the union processes where the NMB single carrier determination, potential elections, seniority integration, and potential JCBA negotiations for combined flight attendants. And once you go into multi-year towards the end of it, that will be the full integration and the Sun Country brand will be retired. So Mark, the DOJ cleared the deal in March. The DOT gave its blessing on April 15th. The shareholder vote is expected as early as May 13th. What does all of that mean in plain language for our TWU members, both the flight attendants and the dispatchers affected by this deal?
Sure. Look, the TWU is the largest airline union in the country. And airline industry is very unique in America. It's had decades of consolidations. Airlines merging with other airlines, airlines putting airlines out of work, bankruptcy. And so there's two parts of it, the business part and the government part. So our government pushes historically, for as long as we've had a country, this idea that we don't like monopolies. We're very worried to lose competition. If you only had one airline, think of how high the prices would be. They're already high. And so the idea is you first have to decide if one airline wants to buy another. And so this is Allegiant buying Sun Country. Eventually, there will not be the Sun Country brand. The first thing the government has to decide, is this so anti-competitive? Is this going to have such a negative impact on the cost of travel for Americans that we shouldn't let that go through? So the Department of Justice has already looked at this and has already said, we're going to allow this merger. And the current administration in the White House is pro mergers and acquisitions. So it wasn't a surprise. And these companies are relatively small in terms of capacity in the overall industry. And they didn't think it would have an anti-competitive effect, hurt passengers. So that part's been cleared. The second regulatory part is when you go into the Department of Transportation and they want to make sure it won't hurt the transportation industry, that somehow this will inhibit or hurt air travel in America and internationally. And we've cleared that government hurdle. So now there's two more government hurdles that have to go forward. And one is, at some point, the Department of Transportation through the FAA has to decide, am I going to give this carrier a single operating certificate? Will they come as one airline, or will they be owned and still operate as two separate airlines? It's a very different kind of idea. The plan here, as we understand it, it's going to be both. For some period of time, months, more likely years, they're going to operate with one owner, but two separate airlines, keeping them separate. At some point, the intention is for the airlines to eventually merge, be acquired, and it will be the Allegiant name, the Allegiant brand, the Allegiant colors, and it'll be one airline called Allegiant, and the Sun Country brand will disappear. That will take a while. It could take months, much more likely years, because it's going to be driven by regulatory review, and the company has to decide on a business point of view, when are we really ready to do that? So we're going to be two airlines for quite a while. That's the government part. The next part is the business end, and that is, how do you make two airlines into one? What do you do with uniforms? Who's going to be in charge of HR? Who's going to run the back office? Which computer systems are you going to use? And so that becomes business decisions. And then in the middle of all that is the TWU. And we have a government agency that deals with this called the National Mediation Board that's been dealing with airlines, don't make me be a lawyer, but I will be, since 1936. It started with railroads in 26. And the NMB, as we call it, comes in and decides what's going to happen between two unions and two unionized workforces. That's a while down the road. Could be months, much more likely to be years. And then we've got to decide which union represents our dispatchers. It's going to be the TWU. And which union's going to represent our flight attendants? I believe it's going to be the TWU. And we're going to talk more about that. So you have a business aspect to this, an airline government regulation aspect to this, and of course you have a labor aspect. The next thing that's coming up momentarily is, I believe it's May 13th, the shareholders of both companies will decide we're getting married or not. And all expectations from Wall Street is that this will be approved by the shareholders, because it's already been approved by their boards of directors on May 13th. So the business end of it should be closing in the sense that the deal will be final from a business point of view, and there's just a lot of work ahead. And quite frankly, we're good at this and we're ready for this.
Awesome. That was a great explanation, Mark.
Thank you.
So can we expect anything to change in the immediate future for our members?
Well, there are always legal issues going on, regulatory, and the company's going to be doing lots of work. They've got to look at manuals. They've got to look at safety issues. But from our point of view, as flight attendants and dispatchers, no. There'll be a lot of information from the company, but two separate airlines, two separate contracts. We have a contract. That is the cornerstone of all this. The smartest thing you all did, we did, is to have a union, your union, and a contract. And so You're not going to see anything change in the short term. The contracts are in force. Every legal right you have is intact. Your union is on top of this. And no. So the short answer is there'll be a lot of business things going on, but from our everyday work at the desk as a dispatcher or on the jump seat as a flight attendant will be the same. And that will be months and possibly years.